why do you think that de-dollarization is not just important, but also possible?
Well, there are two things that Paul Krugman has shown that he does not understand in any article he's ever written. First of all, he does not understand money. All of his economic models assumes that money doesn't exist. They're barter theories. That's why all of his trade discussion, they're called the barter terms of trade. The other thing that Paul Krugman does not understand is balance of payments. Now, it's the reason that he is so popularized is because he does not understand them. If he understood the balance of payments and money, he wouldn't be popularized. He'd be here with me talking to you instead of writing in the New York Times. The de-dollarization doesn't mean having an alternative currency like the euro or the dollar or the yen. It doesn't mean a domestic currency at all. De-dollarization means how do you avoid having to keep your reserves in dollars where the United States can simply confiscate them, as it confiscated 300, along with Europe, $300 billion of Europe's money. And it's now threatening to grab all of Saudi Arabia's American holdings if Saudi Arabia opposes the American joint American-Israeli attempt to take over the Near East and attack Iran. The proposals to replace the dollar don't mean using each other's currency. You'll denominate trade in each other's currency. You'll have, of course, some holdings of other countries' currencies, just as every country holds other countries' currencies to stabilize the foreign exchange market. But the big problem is, what do you do with to keep your international reserves, the savings of the country in a kind of global money? In other words, what do you do to replace the role that gold had prior to 1971? The problem is that the growth in international reserves itself is a function of American military spending. Almost all these dollars that have been ended up in the bank accounts of foreign governments have been injected into the world economy, not by foreign trade, not even by foreign investment, but by foreign military spending. And again, I showed the statistics in Superimperialism and in the monographs that I've written. The U.S. Private sector for many decades was exactly in balance. It was the government sector, and specifically the military sector, that pushes dollars into the foreign economies. And what are foreign countries going to do with the dollars? Especially what would a country like Japan or China, which were the big accumulators of dollars in the 80s and 90s, do? Well, the United States will not let these countries do what the United States does to them. It won't let these countries buy major American industries. It won't let them buy control of any major technology. It will only let them let these dollars be invested in U.S. Treasury securities, or maybe in the stock market, or maybe you can buy scattered real estate. But if it's in the stock market, it can't be control of an American companies like corporate takeovers. It can only be a very minority holdings. Well, this doesn't give other countries much safety in their reserves. And the problem is the fact that these reserves are unnecessary in the first place. The reserves measure imbalance in international trade, investment, and payments. And if the world worked the way it's supposed to in the economic textbooks, countries would be in balance. You would export goods, and that would pay for your imports. You would invest in foreign countries. That would enable you to earn the money to buy, to make plow back into new investment in foreign countries, or to depend on them. So none of this appears anywhere in what Paul Krugman has ever written. His discussion of international trade theory, on which he made his reputation, doesn't talk about the balance of payments or reserves or even money. And I know classmates of his who went, I think it was to MIT with him, said he told one of his classmates, the professor said, don't talk about money. It's too controversial. So he's the last person that you would ever want to talk about either money or international reserves. He used to be, he does have an economic degree, but he's employed as a Democratic Party hack. And if you read his editorials in the New York Times, they're propaganda basically for the Biden administration. And that's his job. His job is to defend American policy and basically foreign policy. As well as domestic policy, by distracting attention away from what is really important in international currency, and that is why are reserves going up? Where do all these dollars come from? If you didn't have American military spending, if you didn't have the American sort of looting of global South countries, you wouldn't have this growth in reserves. And the fact is, you wouldn't need them. You would need basically international credit, so that when a country running a balance of payments surplus, let's say China, would invest in a Belt and Road initiative, it would essentially have a claim on other countries. It would hold a claim on them, but it wouldn't use it as a means of saying, well, we owe your currency, and we're going to throw this currency onto the market and force you to devalue unless you follow our policies and impose economic austerity on your labor force. So basically the World Bank and Krugman supports the International Monetary Fund's approach to international currency, saying in order to hold the dollar, you have to stabilize your currency in terms of the dollar by pushing down the value of your labor. You have to oppose labor unionization. You have to charge high rates of interest to be paid to the American banks or the European banks. You have to impose austerity so you will not have labor developing your own industry to compete with the United States. So international reserves, the lack of international reserves is used to prevent countries from expanding the economy to support the employment and investment and government infrastructure spending that has made the United States and the West rich. Well, the global South countries and the global majority want to get rich in the same way that the United States has done and that China has done by public infrastructure investment. And this entails some sort of international agreement as to how to handle transactions between foreign investors and domestic countries. Well, the Americans, you remember under President Obama, the Trans-Pacific Partnership idea. Other countries are not allowed to fine American or any other country oil companies for pollution, or mining companies for pollution. They can't charge any damages for violation of the environment. They will bear all of the environmental costs of oil spills, of mineral pollution, of all the others. If they try to tax these countries or fine them, they have to pay an enormous fine that will leave them basically bankrupt internationally. So the fact is that access to international credit, to international reserves, is used as a kind of political leverage to force them to follow laws that will not tax American and European firms, that will let them use accounting stratagems to pretend not to earn any profits at all at home, but to take them in offshore tax havens and offshore banking centers, to pretend that there are no profits. The whole international financial system is a massive pretense to avoid two things: to avoid paying taxes to the countries that are the host countries for investment, and to avoid making companies responsible for the economic damages that they cause to the environment and to the rest of the economy. All of this is part and parcel of the international reserves and the international financial system, and that's what Krugman and the United States national security people and basically trade strategists want to prevent. They want to keep the system the way it is. They don't want other countries to be able to avoid dependency on the United States and the IMF and the World Bank for what they can and cannot invest in. So if you're looking at reserves, you want to put it in the whole context of where is the overall economy going? And where is the all regional economy for the 75% of the world that doesn't want to be governed by the United States and NATO? Where is it going?
I wanted to briefly discuss about these new discussions that we hear about efforts of de-dollarization. You have recently called for a new multilateralism where you have attacked several existing international economic institutions and policies. How hopeful are you about these steps? And does this fit into the sort of larger scheme of things that you are saying?
You know, I'm very conflicted about this. At one level, I certainly see that this is happening. And I think the US has actually been leading that process. I imagined that if it did happen, that you would get a decline of dollar hegemony. It would happen with Trump, you know, with the kinds of America first and inward looking strategies and so on. But in fact, it's the Biden administration that has been, and yes, there is the continuing trade war with China. I would call it a technology war rather than a trade war. It's really about who will control the frontier technologies of the future. But the big shift is in terms of the sanctions. So the US had already used sanctions as a political weapon with Iran, Syria, Venezuela, yeah? But these are relatively small countries with less political voice. Now you do it to Russia. You basically say, well, you've got so many reserves in banks in my country, which are legally yours, but I'm not going to give you access. I'm going to take them, like they have done with Afghanistan's reserves. And people are starving in Afghanistan, but they're saying, no, we're going to give this to Afghan refugees in the US. I mean, on which principle of international law will allow you to do that, right? So they did this with the reserves, which already made central bankers everywhere in the world sit up and say, oh, they can do that and get away with it. So maybe we shouldn't keep our money in places where it can be accessed so easily and effectively frozen and taken away from us. But the other big thing they did, part of the sanctions, was the SWIFT, right? SWIFT is this system of international payments, which is it's a consortium of banks that does it, but it's Western banks. And most global trade has been organized through SWIFT. In fact, there are those who argue that, you know, just as container technology was a critical technological input into globalization, it made the emergence of global supply chains possible because suddenly you could import and export larger quantities and volumes very cheaply. Similarly, SWIFT was, if you like, the financial equivalent of that.
This is a revolutionary, technological revolution.
That's right. It was absolutely critical in enabling the trade credit and the financing that, in a sense, oiled the wheels of global trade over this period of globalization. Now suddenly you're saying, well, it's only for my friends. If I decide I don't like you, you don't get access to SWIFT. That's huge. That's really saying that you cannot trust me for any of the things on which you have built your trade and financial patterns. So more and more countries are saying, well, we have to have a backup plan. Especially not just because I want to continue importing Russian oil, but supposing tomorrow they say, we don't like you either. Then, you know, you don't want to be left without anything. So yes, there are clear moves towards these alternative arrangements. And we are going to see whether they are regional blocks or more complicated kinds of arrangements, we're going to see all of that. Now, having said that and seeing that this is the writing on the wall, and in a sense, the decline of US hegemony is not a bad thing because it hasn't been all that wonderful for much of the world, right? But
to put it mildly.
Yeah. But the trouble is really the failure of multilateral institutions because, we do need multilateral institutions. Our problems are international more than ever before, right? We saw it in the pandemic, which unfortunately was not dealt with in a properly international way. But climate change, right? It's not a respecter of borders and passports and visas.
Right.
It will affect everyone, and we'll have to deal with it on a global planetary basis. So it is
And
true
China
that
becomes very critical in this. I mean, in the
China,
fight
but
of climate change.
China, yes, but cooperation is also critical. Cooperation for finance, cooperation for technology and knowledge, cooperation for implementation. All of these are critical. We can't do it without cooperating.
Right.
And that seems to have gone. And that to me, it's not just a tragedy, it's scary. Because the multilateral system as we know it is either powerless or ineffective or sometimes absolutely counterproductive. Let's admit it. Our institutions are not fit for purpose. They have to be massively revamped. I'm part of a commission. I think you mentioned it was the Secretary General set up a board to look at the possibilities for effective multilateralism. And we've made a number of suggestions. The report will be handed over on the 18th of April. And the idea is really to just completely revamp these institutions because you have to. These are not working right now for the kinds of challenges we face. And the trouble is that these challenges are not going to go away. They will only get worse. So we do need to come together to cooperate with a different set of rules and a different priority and manner of functioning of these institutions. Now, you can say it's a pipe dream. That is not going to happen given geopolitical tensions, given the nature of power and all of that. But if it doesn't happen, frankly, we're all doomed. So we got to hope that it happens somehow or the other.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have 2 requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.